During a real school shooting, my teacher refused to go into lockdown and even blocked the light switch as the gunshots came closer. When I begged her to let us hide, she said, "Sit down or you're expelled." I just stared at her. That was 1 year ago. Last week, she was led out of her apartment in handcuffs. I was in Miss Brown's AP history class when the lockdown announcement crackled over the PA. Lockdown. Lockdown. This is not a drill. We done this drill 100 times since kindergarten. Lights off. Hide in the corner. Stay quiet. Simple. Everyone started moving automatically, but Miss Brown stepped in front of us with that look she gets when someone questions her authority. "Get back to your desks now." Her voice had that edge that meant business. I didn't approve any lockdown drill today. I raised my hand out of habit, but Miss Brown, we're supposed to. The only procedures you follow are mine. Sit down or you're all getting zeros on your presentations. Then she launched into her whole "I've been teaching for 25 years" speech. The one about respect and how her generation didn't need constant hand-holding. Here's the thing about Ms. Brown. She was one of those teachers who was super strict about weird stuff, but lazy about actual teaching. She'd mark you absent for being 30 seconds late, but give everyone A's on essays she obviously hadn't read. I once turned in a paper with a whole paragraph about SpongeBob in the middle just to test it. Got a 98, so most of us sat back down. Nobody wanted to risk their GPA over what was probably just another drill. But then the announcement repeated. Code red. This is a code red. All staff and students follow lockdown procedures immediately. That never happens in drills. They announce it once and that's it. My stomach started doing this weird flip thing. The same feeling I get before a big test I didn't study for, except worse. I kept glancing at the door. The hallway was still bright, fluorescent lights blazing. In drills, teachers always turn off their lights immediately. Then I heard it pop like firecrackers, but not. Everyone's phones started buzzing at once. I pulled mine out under my desk. My boyfriend Tyler was in chemistry 2 halls over. His text made my blood freeze. Hiding in supply closet. Someone has a gum. Where are you? More texts flooding in behind filing cabinet in main office. Under Mr. Garcia's desk, I showed Miss Brown my phone. My boyfriend says there's someone with AI. See what's happening here. You think you can stage some elaborate prank to get me in trouble? Get me fired? The popping sounds were getting louder. Closer. Someone screamed in the hallway. Not a fun scream, not a playing around scream. That's probably drama class practicing, Ms. Brown said, but even she didn't sound sure anymore. I could see Mr. Peterson's class across the hall. Lights off. No movement. Just darkness where 20 kids should have been. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type. Henderson won't let us hide. Still at desks. Tyler, what? Get to safety now. Ben tried next. Sweet Ben, who never argued with anyone. Ms. Brown, please. This feels real. Feelings aren't facts. Ben, sit down. More running in the hallway. Lots of feet all going the same direction. Away from something or someone. The PA crackled again but cut off mid-word. That's when we heard the shots. Not pops anymore. Bang, bang, bang. Like someone slamming a metal door, but sharper, louder, real. I stood up. We need to hide now. Sit down or you're expelled. Ms. Brown moved to block the light switch. I will not lose my job because you children want to play games. Something in me snapped. I don't care. I sprinted for the lights. That's when everyone lost it. Half the class rushed to the safe corner. The other half froze at their desks, torn between a lifetime of following rules and that primal voice screaming, danger. Ms. Brown grabbed at my arm as I passed, but I yanked away. She was yelling about disrespect and consequences. You're all being hysterical. This paranoia is exactly what social media has done to you. Manufactured fear, but we weren't listening anymore. Desks scraped across linoleum as we barricaded the door. Someone was crying. Someone else was praying. The kids who'd frozen finally scrambled over, cramming into our corner. 23 teenagers trying to become invisible. Everyone except Ms. Brown. She stood at her desk, arms crossed, fury radiating off her. The door knob rattled. Everyone stopped breathing. The handle turned, locked. Thank God. Locked. A shadow passed under the door. Paused. We could hear breathing on the other side. Or maybe that was just my heart pounding in my ears. Footsteps moving on. Those were the longest 10 seconds of my life. The SWAT team found us 40 minutes later. Ms. Brown was still babbling about how we'd overreacted to a simple drill. And a week later, we finally found out why. Because that's when they told us who the shooter was. Jake Wilson from my sophomore English class. The quiet kid who sat in the back corner drawing anime characters in his notebook. The paramedic wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm while I sat on the gurney outside. My whole body shaking like I had hypothermia even though it was May. She kept checking my pulse and asking if I could breathe okay, but all I could think about was Jake walking past our door. Jake with a gun. Jake, who I'd lent a pencil to last week. Detective Santos showed up with her badge and notebook, crouching down to my eye level while asking me to walk through everything that happened in Ms. Brown's room. I told her about the announcement, about Ms. Brown making us stay at our desks, about the sounds getting closer. She wrote everything down, nodding when I mentioned turning off the lights myself. The parking lot was chaos with parents running everywhere, news vans setting up, ambulances leaving with their sirens on. Mom crashed through the police tape, still wearing her hospital scrubs, mascara running down her face as she grabbed me so hard I couldn't breathe. She kept touching my face, my arms, checking for injuries that weren't there, while demanding answers from Detective Santos about how a teacher could keep kids exposed during an active shooter. Tyler's mom was there, too, crying and hugging him over and over while he stood there looking blank. Detective Santos brought me to a quieter spot and pulled out her tablet, showing me screenshots of my text to Tyler about Ms. Brown not letting us hide. She said 23 students had already given the same story, that Miss Brown kept insisting it was fake, even after the gunshots started. 2 kids died in the math hallway, she told me. 3 more were at the hospital, all from rooms that followed protocol immediately, except for one girl who got grazed by a bullet that went through a door. Dad showed up and took over from Mom, leading me to his truck without saying anything. The radio stayed off the whole drive home, and we both jumped when a motorcycle roared past us at a red light. Our house felt wrong, too normal with its regular smell of coffee and laundry detergent. Dad made spaghetti, but I just pushed it around my plate while my phone kept buzzing with messages from everyone asking why Miss Brown didn't let us hide. That night, I couldn't sleep. Just kept replaying those 40 minutes over and over. The next morning, an automated call from the district said school was canceled indefinitely and counselors would be available at the community center. Mom called in sick to stay home with me, but I locked my bedroom door and sat on my bed thinking about how we almost didn't barricade, how we almost stayed at our desks like Ms. Brown wanted. Channel 8 had our school on every commercial break. And then Ms. Brown's face filled the screen, standing in her driveway, telling the reporter she maintained control during chaos and her students were alive because she didn't panic. Mom grabbed the remote and threw it so hard it cracked the TV screen. Tyler sent me a link to someone's cell phone video from Mr. Peterson's dark classroom, showing everyone hidden and silent while Ms. Brown's voice carried through the walls talking about manufactured fear. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. right when she was blocking the light switch. The video had 50,000 views in 2 hours, and the comments were brutal. I spent the next day in my room jumping every time the house creaked or a car door slammed outside. Mom brought soup I didn't touch, and the group chat kept going off about lawyers and lawsuits, but I couldn't focus on any of it. Principal Foster called that evening in his careful, principal voice, saying the district needed my written statement about Ms. Brown's actions, separate from the police investigation. Mom grabbed the phone and told him I'd provide it through our attorney, news to me. Since I didn't even know we were getting one. The next morning, Ben's mom drove him over. He said he needed to talk to someone who'd been there, someone who understood. We sat on my front porch, and he kept starting sentences he couldn't finish, about almost staying in his seat, about what would have happened if I hadn't turned off those lights. His hands were shaking, just like mine. Later that afternoon, Tyler's parents dropped him off. We went straight to the backyard, to the picnic table under the big oak. He rolled up his jeans and showed me the dark purple bruises on both knees from wedging himself behind the chemical storage shelves in that supply closet. His voice stayed flat as he told me how the shots got closer, how he knew I was 2 halls away but couldn't do anything about it. We sat there for an hour, not really talking about it, but not talking about anything else either, while his fingers picked at the splintered wood on the table. Day 5 started with Mom on the phone scheduling appointments. By noon, she'd found Rebecca Thompson, a lawyer who specialized in school safety cases. Her downtown office walls were covered in newspaper clippings, lawsuits, negligence reports, safety violations at schools across the state. Rebecca scanned Mom's notes and said, "What Ms. Brown did went beyond poor judgment. Leaving students exposed during an active shooter situation was criminal endangerment." Then she asked the question that stuck with me, what makes a teacher so certain the danger isn't real when every other classroom is already dark and hidden? She explained how other families were already filing civil suits, though criminal charges would be up to the district attorney. Day 6, the community meeting turned into chaos. The second Ms. Brown walked into the civic center with her union rep, parents started screaming. She just stood there with that same controlled expression she'd had during the shooting, repeating that she'd followed her professional judgment. Someone threw a water bottle that smashed against the wall behind her, and security had to surround her just to get her back outside. That night, the detective called with a question that made my whole body go cold. Had Ms. Brown ever mentioned Jake Wilson in class? He'd been her student 3 years ago. Everyone already knew the name through whispers and group texts, though the news wasn't saying it yet. Day 7. Morning. I finally forced myself to shower and change out of the same clothes I'd been wearing for days. Dad was at the stove making pancakes like any other Sunday, but we both jumped when the doorbell rang, just a delivery guy with a package. That split second of panic was becoming our new normal. That evening, the news finally confirmed it. Jake Wilson. They showed his yearbook photo from graduation, a quiet kid I only vaguely remembered from freshman year. Then the anchor dropped the real bomb. Wilson had filed a formal complaint against teacher Patricia Brown 3 years ago for psychological abuse. Mom grabbed her phone to call our lawyer while Dad scoured online records. We found a school board transcript from 2021 mentioning a sealed student complaint against staff, with dates that matched perfectly, even though Ms. Brown's name wasn't listed. Day 8. Tyler picked me up, and we drove to the empty mall parking lot. We sat with the engine off, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Finally, he said, she knew. She had to know it might be him. And she still kept us all exposed. Ben started texting the class group chat with what his parents had found. 3 classmates from Jake's year remembered Ms. Brown targeting him. Melissa said she failed him on a technicality that nearly cost his graduation. Day 9, the detective came with a court order for Ms. Brown's personnel file. Jake's wasn't the only complaint. There were 6 others, all sealed. She asked for my detailed statement about everything Ms. Brown said while we begged her to let us hide. It took me forever to start, but I finally wrote it step by step, just facts. Day 10. The news said Ms. Brown was placed on leave, but the teachers' union called it a rush to judgment. Online comments split between calling her a hero or demanding her arrest. That afternoon, Principal Foster admitted parents had complained about her harshness for years, but tenure and test scores protected her. His voice cracked mentioning the 2 kids who didn't make it out. Day 11, Jake's manifesto leaked, 3 pages about Ms. Brown failing him, mocking him, and blocking his college dreams. He had recordings, dates, and proof. That night, Rebecca gathered all 23 families, revealing the district had been warned by Jake's therapist 2 months earlier. Parents erupted in anger. Day 12, Ms. Brown went on a podcast, using my full name and twisting my life into lies. The episode spread fast, and suddenly strangers were calling me a liar, a crisis actor. Someone even harassed my mom at work. Rebecca filed a cease and desist, but the damage was done. Day 13, Tyler slept on my floor because neither of us could stand being alone. The what-ifs haunted us. He kept saying he should have pulled the fire alarm. Meanwhile, Ms. Brown's husband launched a GoFundMe that raised $30,000 in 6 hours, painting her as a victim. Day 14, Ben's family pulled out of the legal action after his dad's business lost contracts, likely tied to Ms. Brown's brother-in-law's influence. Later, Daniel Harris found me at a coffee shop with video he'd recorded from the office. It showed Ms. Brown calmly walking the hall after the first shots, while other teachers had already hidden students. He sent it straight to Detective Santos. Day 15, I went back to therapy. I told Dr. Patel how I still hear Ms. Brown saying we were hysterical while people died. That night, Daniel's video hit Twitter. By midnight, #Brownie was trending with 40,000 retweets, people zooming in on her checking her phone while chaos unfolded around her. Day 16, news vans swarmed Daniel's house until his parents sent him to Boston. Detective Santos showed me the video with a state specialist, pointing out how Ms. Brown showed no shock when shots rang out, calmly walking the hall. They were building a willful endangerment case, up to 5 years in prison. Mom pulled me from school for homeschooling. Day 17, Ms. Brown's lawyer held a courthouse press conference with powerful former students behind him, calling the video doctored. Tyler's parents moved him to private school that same day. Our phones became lifelines, texting at 3 a.m. just to know the other was still there. Day 18, I found an old Reddit thread naming Ms. Brown as the worst teacher, accusing her of mind games and targeting students. I sent screenshots to our lawyer. Day 19, the school board meeting collapsed into screaming matches. Ms. Brown's supporters later posted our addresses online, and the judge dismissed restraining order requests as free speech. That night, I snapped and synced Ms. Brown's lockdown commands with the sound of gunshots, posting it to TikTok. By noon, it had 2 million views. Other students posted their teachers' quick lockdowns, proving every classroom hid within 30 seconds, except ours. Hashtags exploded. #teachers save students versus #Brown chose control. The DA charged her with 23 counts of reckless endangerment. Ms. Brown turned herself in, smiling with her teaching awards pinned to her jacket. Supporters raised her $50,000 bail in just over 2 hours. Cameras caught her smirking on the courthouse steps. Families of victims began weekly meetings. Mom went, I couldn't. Ben's mom later found Jake's essay covered in Ms. Brown's scathing red ink, calling him lazy and disappointing. Detective Santos confirmed 6 more past complaints, all from male students, all buried. Principal Foster resigned in tears, admitting he'd protected her for years. 2 days later, Ms. Brown's lawyer filed a $5 million countersuit against the district, blaming them for security failures. I saw the headline in my therapist's waiting room and laughed at the audacity. Rebecca gathered all 23 families at the community center, announcing we were filing criminal complaints and a federal civil rights lawsuit. Parents signed papers, exchanged numbers, and organized. That night, I began filling a notebook with everything Ms. Brown said in those 47 minutes. Writing felt less like therapy, more like evidence. Days later, a website called Survivors of Room 203 appeared, full of testimonies from former students, 37 stories of humiliation, mind games, and targeted cruelty. A local reporter interviewed me, and I described how Ms. Brown chose authority over our lives. The story aired, and my phone lit up. Ben posted his own account on Instagram, saying he almost stayed seated out of fear of her punishment, admitting I saved him by defying her. His post went viral. The FBI recovered Jake's deleted texts, detailing his hatred of Ms. Brown and plans for revenge. Soon after, news broke that her husband had filed for divorce. When I returned to school for my things, room 203 was still sealed with crime scene tape. Dr. Catherine Mills, a crisis response expert, reviewed the evidence and concluded Ms. Brown violated every safety protocol and endangered students' lives. Meanwhile, supporters raised $50,000 for her defense and staged a rally that clashed with grieving parents. Photos of a sobbing mother went viral, symbolizing our divided town. Survivors gathered at the community center, sharing how their teachers protected them instantly, unlike ours. "We shouldn't have had to save ourselves," one girl said, and everyone nodded. On day 35, the state board opened an investigation, subpoenaing a decade of records. They found 17 ignored complaints, and charges against administrators were possible. By day 40, I testified before lawmakers, telling them Ms. Brown weaponized authority while gunshots echoed, and asked how many warnings it takes before someone acts. Days later, a custodian uncovered forgotten footage, Jake leaving Ms. Brown's class in tears, punching a wall, time-stamped to his original complaint. On day 42, Ben's family rejoined the lawsuit after federal investigators began probing Ms. Brown's brother-in-law for witness tampering. The grand jury upgraded her charges to attempted murder through depraved indifference, normally used in drunk driving deaths, now setting precedent. Tyler deferred his college admission to stay and face the trial with me. By day 47, I had my first good day since the shooting, 6 hours without thinking about it, until the guilt came crashing back, reminding me 2 kids never got that chance. Dr. Patel said healing isn't linear, but it felt like betrayal, like forgetting the kids who didn't make it. On day 50, the state board revoked Ms. Brown's license after hearing 37 former students describe her abuse. She called them weak children, shouting about cancel culture, but the board voted unanimously and referred her for more charges. 2 days later, Detective Santos uncovered a sealed 2009 file. A student at Westfield High had attempted suicide and blamed Ms. Brown. Instead of investigating, the district transferred her because the superintendent's wife was her cousin. Soon, a Facebook group, Survivors of Patricia Brown, exploded with stories spanning 25 years of humiliation, gaslighting, and cruelty.